Now we discuss Charles Dickens, one of the greatest novelists of the world, and he belonged to the Victorian period. And he was a leading Victorian novelist, producing about 15 novels, 5 novellas, about 100 short stories, and producing lectures, visiting various European countries, and performing, reading out his novels, became very popular all over the world. And in most of the universities, there are the novels of Charles Dickens taught for the students. And the name Charles Dickens is very familiar for the learners of English literature. Like we remember the name of Shakespeare, we remember the name of Charles Dickens also. And Dickens is also called a novelist of the children. And most often he is criticized in the way as a writer of children's books. And it is correct that he has produced many children protagonists in his novels. There are many number of child protagonists in his novels. For example, in his novel Oliver Twist, we come to find a boy named Oliver Twist, an orphan. And most often the characters of Dickens, the child protagonists, are orphans. In another novel, The Great Expectations, we come to find again an orphan. And he is called Pip, very popular name. UGC once asked the character Pip to be identified from the novel. He is a very popular character in Dickens's novel Great Expectations. There is no scope for Oliver Twist to be asked from which novel, because the novel itself is titled Oliver Twist. And he was an orphan, born in a workhouse and brought up there. Suffered a lot of difficulties there, being an orphan, ill-treated, not given sufficient food, and after all sent as an apprentice to an undertaker. When he demanded more food, he was sent to an undertaker to work as an apprentice, and suffered in the household of the undertaker also. Fought with a person, another apprentice there, who is named No Calpol. And after all left the house of the undertaker, walked towards London with no money in his pockets and undergoing starvation. And he met a boy named Dodger, and he took him to the company of Fagin. Fagin was a criminal, one-eyed Jewish criminal. And he was the head of boy pickpockets and burglars. There were people like Bill Sikes and Nancy. Bill Sikes was next in importance after Fagin. And he was a criminal, a cruel criminal. He had even beaten his lover to death. Nancy is killed by him. And Oliver is taken by Mr. Brownlow. While picking the pocket of Brownlow, Oliver was caught. Actually, Oliver didn't steal the money. The boys who stole the money ran away, and Oliver was caught. And Brownlow brought him home and made him stay there for a few days, and started an interest in the boy and sent him to the London town for exchanging a few books. And he had even made a wager, a competition with his friend, saying that the boy is a good boy. His nature is good. Actually, Oliver is a good boy. But Oliver was noticed by Nancy and Bill Sikes, and they took him to Fagin. And after all, Fagin ill-treated him, tortured him, put him in a room without giving food, and sent to assist Bill Sikes in a burglary. And while doing the burglary, Oliver was caught by the people there. And the people there are very good people. Mrs. Mailey is the head of the family, a very kind and gentle lady. And she had an adopted niece also, and the girl was adopted, named Rose. Rose actually turns to become the aunt of Oliver. Oliver's mother was the sister of Rose, and it was identified only later. And Oliver was taken by the ladies there and nursed him back to normal health because his arm was shot by the servants there. And after all, Nancy identified that Oliver was there, and Nancy came, and this time she assisted the family, telling the family about the plans of Fagin. Now there is a person named Monks who has come to capture Oliver. And Monks was actually the brother of Oliver. And he was the stepbrother of Oliver. And he wanted to capture Oliver and to put him in the jail so that he will be able to get the full inheritance of the father. In the will of the father, there was a provision. There was a special point that if any of the two, there are two brothers, if any of the two becomes arrested for some criminal activity, will never be entitled to get the share. And Monks actually wanted to put Oliver in the jail, and for that he joined with Fagin. And by the time Oliver was protected by Mrs. Mailey and the others. And when Nancy informed them about this, no culpable, the one who fought with Oliver in the house of the apprentice, was also there joining with Fagin. He is a born criminal, no culpable. And he intimated this, the meeting of the people on a bridge. So the people met on a bridge, and Nancy intimated Mr. Brownlow about the plan of Fagin. And it was leaked out because no culpable was there working as the spy of Fagin and intimated Fagin. Anyhow, by the time, so Oliver came to be identified as the son of Agnes Fleming, a close relative of Mr. Brownlow. And Brownlow took Oliver with the reason that Oliver looked almost like a picture in his house. And it was the picture of Agnes Fleming, the mother of Oliver. And from Monks, Mr. Brownlow heard the story. Actually, the father died after leaving the property for the two boys. And if anyone becomes imprisoned for some criminal activity, will not get the share of the property. And it was this reason why Monks was there with Fagin. And after all, the parentage of Oliver was identified, and Fagin was arrested by the police. And Fagin was sent to the gallows. Even then he was not repentful. And Oliver actually became so surrounded by his relatives, and he identified Rose as his aunt, the sister to his mother, and Brownlow another close relative. And Oliver was protected by Brownlow, Rose, and the others. And the novel ends happily. This is a Bildungsroman. And most often the protagonists of Dickens' novel are children, child protagonists. In Oliver Twist, we come to find a child protagonist, an orphan. So becoming successful at the end. And normally in the novels of Charles Dickens, we come to find a successful ending. There will be always poetic justice. The evil people will be punished and the virtuous people will become rewarded. Like in Shakespeare, we come to find the same poetic justice in Charles Dickens also. And Oliver Twist ends in a happy way. Oliver becomes happy when he comes in the middle of his relatives and when he has become rich. Now he is not a poor boy. Now he is not to be called an orphan. So in David Copperfield also, David Copperfield seems to be his very popular novel. Charles Dickens started writing novels in 1836 with his Pickwick Papers. Pickwick Papers is actually not like Oliver Twist or David Copperfield. It's a different kind of novel. So it's funny, very interesting, and there are the comic things included in the novel. And like Pickwick Papers, we come to find there is another novel called Master Humphrey's Clock, and both these novels Pickwick Papers and Humphrey's Clock both describe interesting experiences of the club members. So in Pickwick, we come to find a Pickwick Club, and in Master Humphrey's Clock also we come to find a group of members in the club. And the club is called Master Humphrey's Club, and the other club is called Pickwick Club. And these novels are not actually presenting the child protagonist, these two novels. And most of the novels of Charles Dickens present the child protagonist, and when we avoid novels like Pickwick and Master Humphrey's Clock, we come to find that in most of the novels there are the child protagonists. So in his novel Old Curiosity Shop, it is Nell Trent, a girl of only 14 years, becoming Dutch due to starvation. And after all, in his Barnaby Rudge, even though it is a historic novel, the protagonist is a child, a boy of 15 years, named Barnaby Rudge, with a raven on his shoulder named Grip. And he has got a raven, and he is able to talk with the raven. And there is again a child protagonist, even though it is a history novel. And when we get into Nicholas Nickleby was produced by him in 1838. 1836, Pickwick Papers. 1837, Oliver Twist. 1838, Nicholas Nickleby. 1836, Pickwick Papers. 1837, Oliver Twist. And 1838, Nicholas Nickleby. And in Nicholas Nickleby again, we come to find a child protagonist, a boy actually. He has got no father and is responsible to look after his mother and sister, and looking for some help from outside. And the one relative there is Ralph Nickleby, an uncle, a rich man, but he refused to help Nicholas. And Nicholas went to work in a school run by a very cruel man, Wackford Squares. And this man used to torture the children there. And he is the one who runs a school, Dolbodies. And after all, while working there, he quarreled with Wackford Squares and had slapped him, had beaten him, and escaped from there with another boy named Smike. So a very lean, poor boy, and he had tuberculosis and he became dead. And at a later stage, it was identified that Ralph Nickleby, the cruel uncle of Nicole, committed suicide because originally he was the father of Smike, who died of tuberculosis. And Nicholas became an actor in a theatre group, and after that he became the owner of a theatrical company. He became the owner of a theatrical company called Cheeryble Brothers. And after all, he got married with a girl, a beautiful but penniless girl, Madeline Bray. And he arranged the marriage of his sister with Mr. Frank. And the novel ends happily. The child protagonist Nicholas Nickleby growing up. And these novels are called Bildungsroman, coming of age novel. And speaking about the birth, the growth and maturity. And if the person becomes mature, so from his growth, from his childhood and growing into maturity, this is called Bildungsroman. And if he turns to become an author or a writer or an artist, the pattern is called Kunstelroman. And these two, Bildungsroman, coming of age novel, and Kunstelroman, coming of age novel, turning the character into an artist. And after all, this is also a very popular novel, Nicholas Nickleby, and it was produced in 1838. And after that, Dickens produced Master Humphrey's Clock. And then he came out with Old Curiosity Shop, and in 1841, he came out with his novel. He came out with his history novel, Barnaby Rudge. Not at all a very popular novel, Barnaby Rudge. And Dickens has got two history novels. And the other history novel is A Tale of Two Cities. And this novel slightly different because we don't come to find child protagonist here. So this is a social novel. And it is set against the background of French Revolution. And the story takes place in Paris and London, say in France and in England. In some area of the story, we come to find the setting is England. The beginning is England, and the ending of the novel is in Paris. So these are the two cities mentioned in the novel. Once you say asked a question, which are the two cities mentioned in the Tale of Two Cities? Which are the two cities where the action of the play, the action of the novel, the story of the novel takes place? The story takes place in two cities, Paris and London. And in the beginning it is London, 1775. Say some 14 years before the French Revolution. French Revolution actually started in 1789. And this novel starts in 1775. And it is in 1775 a person is recalled to life. And the first book of A Tale of Two Cities is called Recalled to Life. And the question, who is recalled to life? Alexander Manette, a French doctor, is recalled to life because he was unnecessarily put in the Bastille prison for 18 years. For no reason. For no crime made by him. For no mistake of Alexander Manette. He was arrested and put in the jail for 18 years. He lost his consciousness. He forgot everything. Now he was trained to make shoes, cobbling, doing the cobbling work. And he was in the jail for 18 years and now he was released from the jail. And one of his former servants named Defarge had sheltered him, put him in one of his rooms above his wine shop. And this is all, so what we come to learn in the beginning of the novel. And so when the novel progresses, we come to find Jarvis Lorry. Jarvis Lorry. So an officer of the Tellson's Bank, and there has been a bank called Tellson's Bank. And they have got their branches in Paris and headquarters in London. And they have got many branches in Paris and London, and the headquarters is also in London. And Tellson's Bank actually look after the affairs of the people, the investors in both France and in England. And even they look after the domestic affairs of the investors also, because it was such a very bad time. So there was no security or safety in Paris. There was the revolution. And during the time, so there was the Tellson's Bank doing very commendable service, like looking after the domestic affairs also. And it was the Tellson's Bank looking after a young girl named Lucy Manette. And Lucy Manette is found staying in London, and her things are managed by, and she has been financially assisted and brought up by Tellson's Bank, under the care of Tellson's Bank. And the person responsible for it is an officer, a gentleman, a very good, nice officer named Jarvis Lorry. In the beginning of the novel, we come to find Jarvis Lorry coming to London with the intention of taking Lucy, the young girl Lucy, only 18 years, Lucy Manette, the daughter of Dr. Alexander Manette. And she thought that her father was dead, that there was no news about her father. She thought that her father was dead. And Jarvis Lorry, when he came to understand that Alexander Manette, the investor of their bank and the father of Lucy Manette, was released from Bastille and was staying with his old servant named Defarge. So it became the duty of Jarvis Lorry to go and intimate Lucy about her father's release, and to take Lucy also to Paris to bring back, and to take Lucy also to Paris to bring Alexander Manette back. And it is with this intention Jarvis Lorry comes to meet Lucy, and Lucy, on learning that her father is alive and is released from the prison, falls unconscious. Because it was a very surprising news for her, and she was only 18 years and she had never seen her father and thought that her father was dead. and Jarvis Lorry took Lucy to Paris, and they reached the wine shop of Defarge. Defarge has got a wine shop there, and Defarge's wife, Madame Defarge, was there sitting in the counter, and there were a lot of people so crowded outside the wine shop at the time because the cask of a wine, a big cask, had broken, and wine was flowing through the street, and people were drinking the wine from the street, taking it from the road and drinking it. Such kind of people. And the roads are full with children, and there was always noise in the streets in Paris. So when Paris was undergoing a period of great poverty and suffering, and there were the aristocrats, all in the manner of exploiting the poor, and it was the situation there. And unnecessarily these aristocrats put people in the Bastille prison. And Bastille, the prison, was a symbol of cruelty. And with the breaking of the Bastille prison in 1789, the revolution actually started. The revolutionaries, they are also called red caps and republicans. Most of them poor people, workers, laborers, wearing red caps. And they stoned the Bastille, broke down the prison in 1789. But when the novel opens, it is only 1775, some 14 years before the beginning of the Bastille destruction, 1775. And it was in 1775, Lucy Manette went to Paris and brought her father back. And when they entered the room of Alexander Manette, when Jarvis Lorry and Lucy Manette entered the room of Alexander Manette was sitting in a garret, in a small room above the wine shop. And when they entered the room, Alexander Manette put his hand on his eyes because he could not like sunlight coming in, because he had been in Bastille for the last 18 years with no sunlight, with no fresh air. He was in the jail, and he was found cobbling shoes. And Jarvis Lorry asked him about so his name and such things. He could not identify or remember anything. And asked Alexander Manette whether he knew the girl. And Manette looked at the girl but could not identify. He said that he could not. But when he looked at the golden hair of Lucy, so he opened a small package from among the cobbling tools. He had a small package, a paper package, and he opened it and examined the golden hair there.